Hey, lovely people, and welcome to the Gamer's Rest. My name's Tal, and in this show, Tal Talks, I get a chance to talk with talented individuals involved in the TTRPG stream. Today's guest is a writer, designer of 5e classes for Supes and Sorcery, creator of 6 subclasses for the upcoming Twin Drums Wagadu Chronicles, avid actual play former, and administrator for Apochromatic Unlimited. It's Logan the GM.
Hello.
Slightly tongue-tied. Hey, how are you, Logan? You well?
I'm well. It's a lot. It's a lot to talk about in one go. Don't worry about it. And I'm learning increasingly that apochromatic is not a word that a lot of people know how to say right away.
No,
So it's fine.
I was sort of going, okay, I'm pretty sure I'm going to get it wrong, but we'll get there eventually.
Yeah, for anyone who's listening, it comes from a very specific term in photography, meaning to focus various beams of light into one point, which is kind of the ethos of our group. It's a group of POC creators in the TTRPG space. We're all from different points, and we want to focus our light into one spot.
So cool. I love that. Well, that's a great title. Yeah, that's really, really cool. Thank you for giving up your time, especially the weekend, to come and chat with me. There's a ton of stuff that I really want to talk about. But for those who haven't had a chance to meet you yet, just tell us a bit about yourself and where people can find you.
Oh, absolutely. So I like to kind of give people the preface of I am the guy on the internet who talks about giant robots, magical girls, and tabletop RPGs. I go by Logan the GM on most places on social media. That's really where you're going to find me anywhere. If you find a Logan the GM, it's probably me. Thankfully, that wasn't taken up one way or another. But that's where you can mostly find me. But you'll probably see me posting on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, because unfortunately, I don't really like social media that much. But it's the one that I got the platform I got big on, quote unquote. It's the one I get most recognized for. That's realistically what it is. But yeah, mostly I'm just talking about like what type of games are out there, what games I like to engage in. Every once in a while I'll talk about giant robots and magical girls because they're two of my like niche like favorite things growing up. I'm a child of the 90s, so like I'm American, so after, school I'd come home and there'd be Cartoon Network where they would show Sailor Moon and Dragon Ball Z and then Gundam Wing.
Yep.
So like these are the things that like are my formative like media is stuff like that.
I know what you mean. I was born late kind of 70s, but the early 80s with Transformers, Mask, all the kind of that's it. That's my, anything that kind of transforms or has got superpowers. Yeah, it's great. It's what I love.
Yeah, I mean, I have the benefit that like I was because I was young enough that the internet was popping up with all these like fan sites. I did get a lot of exposure to like 70s and 80s cartoons because there was just like a bunch of probably people close to your age or maybe even older who were just like, I want to talk about my favorite cartoon. And I'm like, cool, I'll listen to you talk about it.
It is quite funny because I think kind of growing up, you kind of live in it, don't you? But then when you're a bit older and you kind of look back a bit, you do realize that it's something you just carry with you. And especially if you're in, the creative industry, it's amazing how many streams of those little things you kind of carry with you and kind of go, oh yeah, I know exactly where that's come from.
Yeah. 100%.
So I'm really interested. How did you get started in the industry?
That's a good question. I don't know the exact way to answer it because, well, there's probably one good answer for it. So I started probably now it's probably almost 3 years, a little closer to 3 years ago. I decided that I was going to check out what the industry is like online, see what people are doing. Because if we're talking about tabletop, I have over, at this point, probably 13, 14 years of running games.
Nice.
Like starting back in college when fourth edition for D&D came out. That's where I started. And I didn't hate it. So, that tells you what my personality is like. But about 3 years ago, I started going like, okay, what's everything going on about? And I saw people were posting just like, here's my subclass for this D&D thing, and I'm like, hey, I have players that want to do things, or I have ideas, and I've been writing them for a long time, because there's plenty of free resources out there to like format in a very
Yep.
similar manner. You have to take a little bit of you have to learn a little bit about design to make it look proper, but
Yes.
there's resources out there that can help you make things look like a 5e product.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, here's my stuff. Here's what I'm talking about. And I did that for a couple months, and then I started talking to other people who were existing designers, and said, hey, I like this idea. Oh, and they're like, well, I like that idea, and we just kind of did a bunch of back and forth until one of them, Willie Boo on Twitter, he reached out to me, and because we've talked a couple of times. Willie Boo is a really great designer for a bunch of content. He also does video game stuff, so that's really cool that he's a video game designer as well. Um, he he had done a bunch of stuff for MCDM's Arcadia series of zines, probably some of the best 5e content I've ever seen out there. And like, I was just, oh, I like your work. We're talking, da 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 da. And he's like, hey, I have a gig that's coming up that I need for, and I've seen your stuff. And next thing I know, I have a contract with the Wagadu Chronicles folks, and I've never been contracted for a full job before, not fully, and here I am, classes for an entire book that's been kickstarted already, and I was like, oh shoot, and then all of a sudden I had a lot more people asking me what I can do or what availability I have to write stuff. So it was really, I know that's a long answer, but really how I got started is I started talking to people in the industry. I just put myself out there and I said, hi, I like your stuff. This is my stuff. Let's compare notes.
I mean, it's really easy because when you do create and design stuff, you can kind of get stuck in your own head sometimes, and actually the best way to to get out there is, like you said, just to talk to people, just say, what you're doing is really cool, and opening up that dialogue, and you never know what's going to happen. That's amazing. You must have been stoked when kind of like, hey, here's a gig. Without even
oh yeah, no, absolutely. Getting I will say the one thing that I really enjoy about this space in this industry is that if you can, it's not like a secret sauce of like how you get to meet people and know people. It really does just kind of come down to being genuinely interested in what someone is doing. But once you get in and you start talking to people, there is just kind of this really good energy of like, oh, I have this one project. Are you available? I can't do it, but I know 3 guys who would be perfect for this. And you can start sending that down like to other people, or sending it up even, I guess, because you might know someone up there on the ladder than you, and that's a really cool feeling.
I think you're right. I think the word there is genuine, isn't it? You're not going out there to kind of market. You're actually, you love the industry, and so therefore there's a genuine interest in what people are doing, and the kind of fascination of, I wouldn't have thought of that in a million years.
Yeah, that's the crazy thing. Like, that's a lot of things. If you're looking to get into this industry, or you're in this industry, I think the moment you realize it's like people aren't unapproachable like you might think they are. They're actually very approachable. You just have to be as much of a nerd about something as they are, so that they don't, are just there for. I mean, I don't think it's a secret. There's not a lot of lot of money in this industry, but there's like a lot of opportunities to do some really cool stuff. And if you're just here to look cool, maybe they're not so interested. But if you're here to like, hey, can I spy what you're doing? Can like I figure out how your thought process? Because not a lot of things are like inherently known. There's no obvious answer to how you do a bunch of this stuff.
Absolutely, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to kind of talk to as many different people as possible, was to kind of go, well, how do you do it, and what does it look like for you? And it just sparks so many different ideas, and I love it. I love just seeing how people create things. It's great. And I guess, kind of speaking of that, you clearly have got this love of designing new classes. I've been looking through some of your work and some of the stuff you've done. where do you get your inspiration for? Because it's not an easy thing to do. I think writing an
Yeah.
adventure, most people can get in their head, you go from A to B and there's some traps and, there's a big
Hmm.
monster. But writing a class can be a bit more subtle sometimes.
Yeah. I just recently finished an adventure, the first like published adventure, which I am still waiting. It was for the a D8 charity. They do specific charity work out in Illinois, but they helped me get that published. I don't think it's not published yet. There's an editor still in the works, but that was a from a design point of view, or like how I start designing anything. That was actually probably harder for me than for doing subclasses. Because the way my brain works is when I do adventures and I run things are very much organically listening to what my players want to happen and then responding to that, versus an adventure where I had to plan every contingency out from point A to point B to point C, which when during playtesting really surprised and woof, that was an interesting experience. But something like a subclass is a lot easier for me because a lot of my inspiration comes from trying to emulate a feeling,
Hmm.
um, trying to emulate a certain memory that I've had about something, or if I'm investigating something, because there's a lot of like supplemental research you kind of have to do where when you don't want to just like just blow smoke, you want to actually feel like you have some authority on what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Um, I have a subclass that I never published. It was going to be for Wagadu, but they said this isn't exactly what we were looking for. But I did a lot of research on a fighter subclass that was based off of African stick fighting, which is a fascinating tradition that still goes on today, where bunch of I can't remember it's the Zulu nation
Yeah.
basically founded it, and it's still within the tribes that were part of that at some point. It's just very fascinating because there was a lot of like, how do they do this? Why are they holding three sticks at once? Why wouldn't you just have two sticks? But no, you have to hold three. You have to hold two sticks in one hand, and then you hold another, and one of those sticks is your shield. And sometimes some people cheat by putting sharp ends on sticks. You're not supposed to do that, but they do it anyway, and they they hide the sharp point with some part of like cowtail to make sure that no one can see it. But then, I mean, someone's gonna get hit, and they're gonna obviously start bleeding, type of thing. And it's like something that's done at weddings and something that's done at like big life events. Then I'm like, oh, okay, I'm doing all this research because I got really fascinated, and I was able to turn it into all these little bits for the subclass. And that's kind of like where my process is. Where's the weird, unique thing that you can pull from that no one else is talking about or no one else is really aware of, and how can I bring it to life in this game? And I don't know if it truly answers you the question of like what's the, where do I start, because there's really no one start, because a lot of it does just pull from like, I know something exists, let's learn more about it.
Yeah.
you know
That's really interesting because I think especially with classes, they can feel sometimes very generic.
yeah.
If you're not careful, because if you're a wizard, there's only so many elements and all that kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
clearly, from your kind of design point, you are looking for that slightly different way into it, but that packs a punch of kind of content and is real because it kind of exists out there, and you're
Mhm.
bringing it into something that works in an adventure. That's really cool. I love that.
Yeah, there's something, if you're looking at, I mostly have designed for 5e,
Mm.
but I'm reaching out. I'm reaching out in the form of like, oh, I'm gonna make some homebrew content or something, and I'm like, oh, I'm probably making a game now. That's probably what's just happening, because that's I feel like that happens a lot. But like if you look at 5e design for the published stuff, for the official stuff, for the
Mm.
stuff that they'll let you do at like Adventurers League, it really does feel fairly generic.
Yeah,
And I get why. I 100% get why. I just think it's boring. Um,
yeah,
I
absolutely.
I think the one thing that the so if we have like the homebrew community, and or even just in general, I'll go like, there's homebrew, which is really hobbyist, and then there's the third party, which is just homebrew with money involved.
Mhm.
That's realistically what it is.
Definitely.
But but the difference between in those settings versus the official is that it very feels pointed to a very specific narrative. And I kind of follow that same idea of like I'm trying to tell a specific narrative.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, one of my guests said it's about what's your own individual voice, and
Mhm.
how do you kind of bring that into what you're designing, and I guess that's kind of the key thing, isn't it? Is when you're designing it and it's not in that kind of it has to be this, it has to be that. You can
Mhm.
make it. You want people to know, Logan did this. Absolutely 100% know it's got his kind of signature all over it.
Mhm.
Because I know, saying on Twitter the other day about this time now is the best time to be exploring new kind of stuff, new kind of like TTRPGs, and whilst 5e is a great introduction piece, it's definitely time for people to go out there and find the smaller, the niche, the stuff that rather than mod 5e, I guarantee probably someone's done something that you'll love out there.
Yeah, it's so the next edition of Dungeons and Dragons, which is still just named like 2024 now. I think they went away with their 1D&D naming convention. I really don't even know what they're calling it now. Whether they're going to call it 5.5, 6, 1, I don't know what they're going to call it.
Yeah.
We'll find out. But everything I've read, everything I've seen, and everything I've heard from people who even have seen the books at this point.
Yeah.
Really feel like they're reinventing the game in a way that's super interesting that someone who hasn't homebrewed it already hasn't done. I mentioned Arcadia earlier,
Yep.
from MCDM, and honestly, everything I've heard, like I feel like they've kind of done in their own way, like 2-3 years ago at this point. So it's kind of like you could pay the money for a new version of D&D, or you could keep your D&D because your D&D is probably just as good, to be honest.
Yep.
And if you feel like your D&D isn't good and that the new edition could solve your problems, I have some news for you. You probably need to just play a different game. You probably just need to find a different adventure game, or action adventure game with fantasy elements to it. There's plenty of them out there. There's plenty of old ones. There's plenty of new ones.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I 100% agree. I think it's interesting because to me, from the bits I've seen, it feels like here's some clarification about stuff that most of you have been sorting out yourselves for the last 20 odd years. But we're going to clarify in this book. Great.
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
Yeah, that's great. That's wonderful. I'm glad. I don't think I need it.
Agreed. So, when one of the things that I kind of picked up that I was really interested in, I think this kind of links back to what you were just talking about, was the Bard class that you did, the College of Ballroom.
Yeah,
that's for anybody that's not seen it, I would recommend you go out there and get a copy of it because it's really fascinating. It's not just the actual mechanics of the class, but there's some fantastic background in linking into it as well that kind of drives the narrative for it. It's clearly something you're passionate about. How did that come about for you for kind of designing that?
So College of the Ballroom is a passion project. It is something this is going to be a long story, so hold on.
No, you carry on.
So ballroom as a concept, as an idea, is a result of effectively queer history in New York City, where there were a bunch of effectively, pageants for queer men to come out and, I guess, perform drag. And if you look at it historically, almost all of the winners, almost all of the people in there have been white men. It was just how the scene was. As a response to that, and noticing that no matter how much the Black and Latino participants tried to adhere to the rules, there was a direct kind of counterculture of we're going to do our own thing. We're going to hold our own events. We're going to hold balls. Um, balls from there went on to be not just like where we go on and mimic pageantry. We start mimicking a whole bunch of other parts of queer society, and that as like a moment of like American like unique culture and identity is something that most people here, I imagine it's different even in the UK, but like even here, don't really know much about ball culture or ballroom culture at all because
100%.
it never really made it into the mainstream. I learned about it in like the 2000s when I was introduced to a documentary called Paris is Burning. Great documentary. Please go watch it if you have never seen it. It tells you about the current players at the time and about the life of being queer in New York in like the 80s is like and how crazy everything was. And it gives you a good feeling of it. Today you do see more people kind of refer to ballroom kind of techniques. I mentioned it in the subclass, at least kind of like the what is ball? Like here are the 5 elements of Vogue. And I should clarify, ballroom is both a location and a kind of a culture. Voguing is the movement, is the dance that most people are familiar with. You might remember Madonna, Vogue song, which she fully lifted from the culture, 100%. She did not invent any of that. She is still, she's not seen as like appropriating it. She is more, I guess, calling homage to it.
Okay.
Because she like she never went out there and claimed this is who her culture is. She's more of just like here's a culture that exists, and a lot of people kind of got work out of it when all of a sudden their talents were in demand.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's not something that's part of like the cultural zeitgeist. And in fact, when we do think of queer culture in America, I think especially when I learned kind of about it, it was all really drag and RuPaul's Drag Race specifically, which is part of ballroom culture. There is drag in it, but it's not specifically just drag.
Yeah.
There's many facets to it, and my fascination and interest in this became more prevalent as I learned about this when I was I believed I was straight for a long time because I'm bisexual, so there's a lot of I can hide in that effectively. Um, there's a lot of politics to that, and I don't mean like like who am I electing? I'm talking about like identity politics of like how does one identify? And when I was younger, I was just like, oh, this is a fascinating part of whatever I think it's cool. It's in my back of my head. But as I came to accept my own identity as being bisexual, I went, well, I need to learn more about the culture. I need to understand what is the context of everything that's happening. And that led me down this rabbit hole of like, there is so much that people do not know about this culture, but they call homage to without knowing it all the time. Just in the language that we speak, the way that we talk about how people dress, a lot of it does come from it, and we just don't know that. So started doing a deep dives on it. If you want, like I said, go ahead and watch Paris is Burning. If you want to see something modern that shows it in a more modern context, HBO had a series called Legendary, which is about a bunch of Vogue houses, which houses very much like drag houses, where people go together and they collectively form identities. One big difference with a house and ballroom is that those houses end up actually usually being family because a lot of the kids in these bigger cities that these houses form in have been kicked out by their family. So it's not just like, oh yes, we're performers. It's like, hey, there literally it's a kid on the street and we need to give him a room type of thing. So it's very personal. And the Legendary kind of gives you a sense of like all these houses and seeing like, well, effectively these are the big houses. We have gotten to the point where there are like big names that you can find in multiple cities, and you get to see a sense of like what is the competition like for them. How do they compete? What are they trying to do? It is very because it's an HBO show, it's not like 100% the real thing. You can find plenty of YouTube videos of it, but like the real thing is a lot more gritty, a lot more. We found a random spot downtown that is abandoned for the next 24 hours, so we're gonna use it to compete and then get the fuck out of here, type of thing. And after I had kind of like digested a lot of this content, this world, that I'm like, why aren't we talking about this? This is the coolest thing ever. This is something historical and something that is still being that is emulated. It's not actually being put out to the forefront, and I don't know why. So I wanted to take what I knew about it and took what I had learned about 5e design after doing it for, I don't know, maybe publishing it not too long, but like probably just doing it, being a DM for, years and years and years.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, what can I do to make this into something very fun, but give you the context to what I'm saying? Because I want to tell that story. I want to tell the story of what it being in part of the ballroom scene is like. And it didn't work just saying it. I needed the context of the history of it. You needed to know a little bit. And if you read the article I have in our zine for Apochromatic Unlimited, there is so much more I wanted to say. There is so much in it that I could have said longer history, highlighted specific people, but it would have been much longer than just an article.
Yeah, absolutely. What we'll do is I'll make sure there's links in the YouTube notes. So if anybody does want to go and check out, and I really urge you to, because it's a brilliant read. It's really interesting, and the class is really, I think it's really cleverly designed around the kind of themes that you've gone for there, and you can see how it kind of links through. And I love that, because it's, like I was saying earlier on, it feels like it's got substance to it. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And I'll be honest, it's something I hadn't come across at all in terms of that kind of culture. The UK's, we're quite a reserved country anyway. But
yeah. I was going to say kinky boots is a very British thing in my mind when I think of that. So.
Yeah. But you're right. I mean, I don't think it's something that's necessarily talked about as much or as prevalent as it should be for all the history and the impact it has on so many kind of the current things, like you're saying, how many people are pulling that stuff through. It's a great read. I'd highly recommend it, definitely.
There's there's a thought process that a lot of American culture has always started with black women that then goes to queer men that then eventually gets to mainstream. And I think that something like ballroom isn't necessarily in that direct pipeline, because there's plenty of queer men that started some of it, but there's also plenty of women in it that I think we're due for a lot of these cultures to actually get their time in the sun, and I'm waiting to see it. I'm also afraid of it because there's unfortunate backlash of capitalism ruining a lot of very unique niche things.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Popular, and some corporate entity goes, "Hey, yeah,
absolutely.
We can avoid that, hopefully, because but yeah, do go check it out. I'd highly recommend it. It's and it's a great bard class to bring into your campaigns as well. Definitely.
It's also free, so I'll give you that. It's all free.
Go. Even better. So I guess that kind of does bring me on to, so that was part of creating the zine for Apochromatic. Thank you. So that's part of creating the zine for that. There's a few articles in there as well. So how did that come about in terms of working together to start designing that?
So Apochromatic was formed kind of. I'd hate how much credit I'm giving with D&D, but probably as a response to. Are you familiar with how Spelljammer was received?
Do you know what? I know bits about Spelljammer. It's not something I've ever delved into huge amounts. I know
Okay.
some people love it and think it's
Yeah.
the greatest thing ever, and other people aren't quite as nice about it.
Yeah. So specifically, I'll talk about this. So 5e reintroduced Spelljammer as a setting, and it's what they offered is interesting but very lackluster. I will tell you anything that tries to sell me on a setting that is about being in space but on a pirate battleship and you're fighting other pirates or just going through space, but then doesn't give me rules for ship to ship combat. I'm like, what's going on here? What's the deal? What's the
Ooh,
plan?
no,
And
that's not good.
no, it's selling me on something and then not delivering. But one big thing that um bothered a lot of people was when they introduced a race. Well, it's not they introduced, but they reintroduced a race called the Haduzi, which
Yep.
are monkey people.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with the idea of monkey people. There's nothing wrong with it. It's fun. You can do it. They are unique enough. But there was a part of the backstory that really bothered a lot of people, myself included, which was very much they were originally just simple creatures that were elevated up by a wizard who then enslaved them for multiple years. And it took that, not themselves, they could not liberate themselves from their own slavery. It took them being liberated by the apprentice of this wizard, which we don't know who these people are. We just know that they exist. We know that that's a thing. And that really talks into a lot of tropes in media of like white saviorism type of thing. And like, I'm not going to try and get too much into the weeds because that's not really the point here. But what the point is it really made us go, why are we waiting for people to fix these mistakes? Or why are we waiting for everyone to do it? And then we said, why don't we just do it ourselves? So, Apochromatic was started by myself, my friend Mark J, my friend Kama, and our late friend Wombat, who passed away this year suddenly. We all kind of sat down and we said, why don't we just start doing this ourselves? And we started collecting various people within the space, other people of color who, hey, what do you want to try and make some impact? Do we want to do something that proves that we don't really need them to tell our stories for us? We can do it ourselves. And the zine, as we have it out right now, is kind of our tester of showing people like, this is the perspective of the space from us. Here's some stories from us. Here's some culture elements. Here's our just observations that we've noticed about it. And we want you to take a look at and get a feeling of what we're experiencing. Um, we only have our what we call our issue 0, which is named after the concept of a session 0. Of just, this is in a preview. This is what we're getting things ready for. As time goes on, we're ramping up here soon for some crowdfunding, because what we want to do is we want to hire writers from all over the place to write for us and illustrators to illustrate for us and so on and so forth. It just turns out that's a lot of money. uh,
Yeah.
the first issue is all volunteer. Every bit of it was volunteer. No, none of us got paid. Unfortunately or fortunately, I guess it is just a proof of concept. Which, if you're in this industry, you kind of know that like there's a lot of volunteer work before you see anything.
Mm-hmm.
But when you do what you love, you're not working or something like that. But that's not true. You need
No,
still need to
it's
feed your
not.
family.
Yep, absolutely.
And so that's like kind of the origins of like, we were sick and tired of seeing this over and over. And I mean, it was just kind of a session of us complaining about something and realizing we need to stop complaining about it and start doing something about it.
Absolutely. What's the kind of impact been? Have you had much response, and how's it kind of been received?
We have really only had maybe 2 or 3 negative responses,
Okay,
and
that's
it was
really good.
really just which was really just people saying to us like, well, white people make good stories too, and like, that's not like the antithesis. That wasn't the antithesis of us. We weren't saying that. I'm sorry, that's not what we were saying. If you look at us and see our hobbies, you'll see that we very much like a lot of things white people have made. Um, sorry, that's not what we're saying. But the majority of the response has been very positive, and we get a lot of comments about how, oh, I didn't know something like this existed. What
Yeah.
can I do to be involved? We put on a lot of actual plays, which just live plays of shows where we've had people who said, "Oh, it's really nice to have a spot where I don't have to explain my exact hangups with like the culture at large on being a POC or being worried that I'm being brought on as a token."
Yeah.
Because that is 100% a thing that happens a lot.
It's definitely. I mean, one of the things, and certainly as the industry's kind of grown, is people are very vocal about going, "Oh, you've got a whole white cast, and you should be doing things about it." And it's like, yeah, absolutely, that's very true, but it needs to be more than just invite a person on, so you've got
Yeah.
somebody on your cast. It shouldn't really be that. It should be, how do we make the industry better, and how do we make sure it's not just performative, I guess.
Yep. Yeah, and what we aim to do, as a collective, as a group, is to collect talent in a way that fosters their own growth, as well as gives kind of the industry basically a little like, hey, I know Apochromatic, they have people. Let's talk to them. And we have a in our Discord, we have a like paid opportunities like area where if someone sees a job and it's perfect for someone else, they post saying, hey, they need someone like this, and we can find the perfect person for the exact thing they're looking for because we have that resource on hand. And it's not a thing where we're like keeping track of a database. It's literally just like, I think I know a guy in the server who does this
Yeah.
type of thing, and then we ping them and they're like, oh yeah, I do this type of thing. And I think if you're looking to do better in this space, you need to acknowledge that there are plenty of people who can do exactly what you want from introducing I guess diversity or introducing new ideas. You just have to realize it's not just one person's not a monolith. They can't represent everything for you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So
yeah, 100%, 100%, and it is interesting because I guess I came to this. I think like most people would have come to it from things like Critical Role and
Mhm.
Roll20 and the Adventure Zone. And then you start to dive into things a bit more, and it, you do kind of realize that this industry has got so many people with so many vibrant, incredible talents and stories. But
there are so many people
getting
out
the
here.
space,
It's crazy.
yeah, getting people to have that space to be able to say, this is interesting. This is, we should be able to, the internet's a huge place. There's no reason why we can't foster those kind of spaces and say, you can learn incredible things and you can meet incredible people. You've got to go out there and do it, though.
Yeah, I'm in a couple spaces where I talk about actual play production a lot. Actual play is a big like passion for me. And one of the things that I've kind of determined is our issue now, our current issue, isn't necessarily that people don't understand what actual play is. It's that we don't actually have as many people who are engaged in it as a form of entertainment.
Yeah.
People know about Critical Role. People know about Dimension 20. We have those fans. Those fans exist. They're diehard. They're not going anywhere. We now need to, instead of just like, okay, it's an existing thing that can make money. Freaking Critical Role has a cartoon on Amazon. Like, come on, like they're making money hands over fists with what they're doing in comparison to everyone else. Not like they're millionaires for it, but they're making plenty of money.
Absolutely, yeah.
But now the question is, how do we get new people into the space? How do we get people who were not originally interested in it? And I think a lot about that, at least for people of color, about how for a lot of us, getting into this space was just getting over the hurdle of we don't belong. Because there's a lot of both on in our own cultures, but like white cultures, like this is there's a big thing, at least in black culture, of like this is some white people shit. Like you don't engage in it. That's for white people type of thing. And a lot of nerdy stuff like that, it is completely in that realm. And then you have something like BlurredCon, which is a black nerd con in the United States here, which you get to see a bunch of black people just be incredibly nerdy and just having the time of their life and go like, we need to get people culturally in those spaces that don't feel welcome to realize, no, you're not only welcome, but you should be part of it. You should be engaged with it. And I think that's like one of the big hurdles we need to find our way through, of like, how do we engage communities
Yep.
that don't realize that they would not only be welcome, but they could love it here. And I think that would really help. And that's partially what Apochromatic is trying to do, is like trying to find people like us who are part of this, who don't know that they can be engaged in this.
That's so cool. I love that. I really do. I think it's, I think you're absolutely right. We were talking a little while ago just about the need to be able to see people like yourself doing these things in order to actually think, oh, okay, I could get involved in that. I can, go out there and start to make something of it. And I think there's far too many people who don't see enough of who they are, and whether it's, based on background or ability or any of those kind of things. If you don't have that broad base of, I guess, people, it won't kind of change, and it becomes a lot harder. Did you find that, and that's a bit of a personal question, when you started getting into actual play, did you find that challenging in terms of finding places or having to not necessarily justify it, hey, look at me, but having to kind of find that spot?
Personally, not as much. I know people who have, but that's because I kind of have a very abrasive personality when it comes to. No, I'm like, I'll be honest. I didn't accept someone not like. I didn't accept no's a lot of the time. I kind of like push back of like, what's going on? What's the going on?
Yeah.
I work in an environment. I do IT, but I'm at the higher level at this point where I do things where like I have to always kind of push to figure out what's actually happening, because there's a lot of people who just say like, oh no, this is just how it is, and I hate that as an answer. And it isn't just how it is. There's always a little bit more. So I was able to kind of push my way into some spots, and then also I was very lucky because I did have some people who were just like, hey, you seem like a great performer, you seem like you'd be really great on our stream, can we just have you on there? My very first performance was with a group called Queen's Court Games, and they reached out to me saying, hey, you sound like you'd be great for this performance here, we'd love to have you on. And it was my first gig, and it was actually also, this is also probably what shaped it, I was paid for my first gig. And if you know anything about actual play, that is very rare. That never happens. So I have an attitude. I kind of have this I know what I'm worth attitude type of thing. Which
nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, and I think that's I think the space is welcoming if you have that attitude. If you walk around believing that you're worth something, you're gonna start reflecting that. The fake it till you make it sounds ridiculous, but it is kind of true.
Yeah.
It is kind of true because when you fake it till you make it, you keep going. You keep working at it. And then honestly, the one thing I hate about that phrase isn't, fake it. It's the until you make it, because I don't think you ever really make it. I think you always have to keep working on it one way or another. And because I've had that attitude, I've been able to find a lot of opportunities. I've been able to get into projects that I just couldn't imagine would be like where I'm at. And I absolutely adore it. And it's also gotten to me to a point where now I understand, when you get started as an actual play performer, you really don't know the tiers of it. And I'm making this up. This isn't real. There's no official thing that someone has out there.
A rule book somewhere.
Yeah, no, I would love it if there was, because then at least I could say, oh, you got to get to chapter 3 before you talk about this stuff. You're talking about chapter 18 stuff. Come on, get over it. But no, there's no rules to it, but there's very much of, I'm looking for some kind of opportunity. Then it goes to, hey, if you want to book me for an opportunity, here's how you can reach out to me. And then it finally kind of ends up with some people who are just like, don't even reach out to me. I got my calendar is full for 3 years. And I am sorry, I just can't do it. Oh wait, you got like a charity stream that's going to be like an hour. I can maybe do that. And these three kind of tiers of like where you are hunting, where you are presenting yourself as an opportunity, and when you are finally at the point where like I have so many opportunities I can't do anything. That is, it's a fun dynamic to get into, and I think you can move faster than a lot of people believe. They just need to have the confidence to go like, I am a fantastic performer. I play these games all the time. I love this stuff. please give me this chance to prove it to you. And I mean, for a lot of people, and maybe kind of going back to what you were saying, like, was it hard for me? It wasn't so hard for me, but for Apochromatic, we try to have the space where people who have never even had an opportunity. We've had a lot of people that we were their first spot to try actual play, and we want to continue to do that. And I would urge anyone who's has a studio out there and is trying to establish themselves, as much as you love the dynamic of four friends, five friends at a table playing D&D together, I'm sorry, but that's been done to death. You're not gonna make anything exciting out of that.
Nope.
Go find new people. Find people who have stories you've never heard before.
Absolutely.
Find people who have never even played an actual a tabletop RPG before. They have never done it. They don't know anything about it, never watched anything. Find them and go like, "Hey, do you want to try it for your first time on camera?" And the person who says yes, I guarantee you will be perfect for that job.
Yeah.
I guarantee you.
You're 100% right. It's that difference between, if you're playing it at home and you're playing with friends, great, fantastic, enjoy it. It's what the hobby's all about. The moment you are looking for it to become something, it won't. I think someone described it as like lightning in a bottle. You won't be able to capture that kind of, hey, we're just a group of 4 college friends who sit around it. Great, congratulations, well done.
You can't emulate Critical Role, because not only is Critical not the 6, 7 friends at a table that they want you to think it is. Like, no shade to them, nothing at all. I appreciate their hustle. You can't mimic that, because not only were they at the lightning in the bottle stage of catching the attention of actual play, they were also professional voice actors who have another gig that they do to make sure they can pay for their bills.
Absolutely.
And that people loved from various other things and continue to fall in love with them without even knowing that they're Critical Role. There are people who love, like Laura Bailey or Matt Mercer, for being fantastic voice actors, and then they find out they do this Critical Role stuff.
Yep.
Like, what? I can get more of them? You know, it's something that, unless you yourself, if you're listening to this right now and you are already like an executive in Hollywood and you got all these friends and you want to do a D&D thing, I'm sure it will work out for you for reasons I have absolutely no ability to mimic. So instead, I don't want to fall into that trap. Instead, I want to fall into, I'm going to tell my stories with people who have not had an opportunity to tell these types of stories. And we're not all necessarily best friends. I have made a lot of good friends in this space because of what I do. Because it kind of does become that thing when you just play a game with someone long enough, you start a good sense of who they are as a person. Even when they're playing another character, you get a good sense of who they are as a person. But like, I'm looking at it like, I want to tell this story. Who is willing to put in the hours, the work to help tell this story? And as someone who, I don't really talk about it much, but I tried to get into this space originally with forming my own friends at a table podcast type of thing, and I realized that's a lot of work that they aren't willing to put in, because that's not what they want to do. It's not their passion. It's a whole different, world there, and it's just, I urge anyone who's trying to get into this space, get away from that friends at a table mindset. It's been done to death. That's the big reason.
Absolutely. So I'm actually really interested when you do go into an actual play and you're developing your character. How do you start that process? Because it's going to be very different from sort of like saying sat around with your friends to knowing this individual will be on camera. They will be, what I'm saying will be out there. How do you balance that and know you're creating something which is, people are going to engage with at that kind of wider level?
So for me, it's one part acknowledging that I have to be entertaining. Because if I was going to play, I'll go with, let's just go with D&D, because that, to me, that's, well, actually no, I'll go with Lancer, because I play a lot of Lancer.
Nice.
Which, if you aren't familiar with it, people, Lancer is a tabletop RPG about piloting a mech in space, or on an alien planet, or on Earth. Although that would be crazy if you know the lore. Being on Earth is not a thing that will really happen, and you shouldn't be on Earth for a lot of reasons. Mostly because Earth is like actually preserved as like a beautiful monument to humanity, which is like kind of ideal. But anyway, that's not my point. What my point is, realizing that I'm entertaining is different than if I was going to just play with my friends, because when I'm going to play with my friends, I might optimize for one role. I might optimize to be a healer or a tank or something like that. But when I'm making a character for an actual play, I'm actually looking for what do I think would be an entertaining character in this genre. Genre is a big thing for me because as fun as it is that everyone wants to be a bunch of goofball clowns running around, that's not great if you're doing a spy thriller. It's fine if one person's a little goofy, but like there is a certain level of like you got to realize that there's something very serious going on here, and when you embrace the genre of the story that you're trying to tell, it's actually really easy to pull from other bits of media. I am just I just recorded. I can't say it yet because it's not announced yet, but I just recorded for a game where I basically it is a spy game with vampires, which is kind of fun. But the character I pulled from was from the anime Lupin the Third. There's a character called Jigen, and Jigen is kind of a no nonsense. Has it's a expert marksman, master of disguise, smokes 12 packs of cigarettes a day type of guy, and a great a great getaway driver. I wanted to emulate what he did because it's within genre, but not necessarily a personality. I didn't necessarily want to be as gruff as he was. I was kind of like, I want to still be friendly and approachable, but I want to mimic what he's doing. So I kind of make a character mechanically that can do what he does or what another person does. Then it's kind of like putting in your own personality. A big thing with actual play is because it's a collaborative thing. In all tabletop is collaborative. You often have a session zero where you can just kind of talk about what to expect in the game. And if someone comes with their character already kind of like conceptualized or what they want to do, that's a really good opportunity. Like, here's what I want to do. And then we're sitting here going like, well, we need to make sure that there's a character who's kind of filling in this kind of role to this genre one way or another. And it does kind of become a whole collaborative effort instead of just a singular, I'm going to bring this one character to this one thing. I've met people who have done that. Not always my favorite. I'll adapt. I'll adapt if you like are set in stone to what you're doing before we even have this conversation. But I will really like to go like I know the genre, or I'm familiar enough with the genre that I can pick some character that I really enjoy in it and take those traits. Then from there I can kind of slap my own personality on that.
Because you're right. I think sometimes when people are new to kind of stepping into it, actual play, they don't realize how collaborative it's got to be, and how you've got to balance. It's not just you; it's 4 or 5 other people, and if it doesn't, it can be very jarring. And I've seen some actual plays where you kind of go, "Ooh, you'd have really valued from a session zero because your characters are just." No, it's just not there. Definitely.
Just having the conversation that allows you to know a little bit more of like what the dynamic is.
Yeah.
I've actually been I'm going to be advocating, I think, for everyone I ever talk to about actual play, is that what you need to do now, unless it's a one shot. If it's a one shot, you can't really do much about it. It is what it is. But if you're going to do a long form game, something that is going to be multiple sessions, like a 10 session, 20 session, whatever, how many sessions it's going to be, you will benefit amazingly from doing that one shot unrecorded without anyone seeing it, but just with you and the players getting a sense of your characters. And if you come in then to the first episode with your characters knowing each other and having a history, as long as it's not too self-referential, as long as it's not like too many in-game jokes that the listener can't know, that's great, because you're going to just organically flow into it, because you already broke out the icebreaker, so to speak.
Yeah, because I remember we did a one a while ago, and after we did the session zero, and we did exactly that, we did kind of like a playthrough where we did like a mini adventure, and I kind of walked away going, my characters, I don't like the dynamic. I don't like how he sat. And so I made some real changes to kind of the personality and how he sat within the team. And it was so much better. And I think having the ability to kind of go, actually, I might want this, but it's better for the game as a whole that I kind of step back a little bit, or I move this around, and actually it's a production for all of us rather than just, you're the star of it, if you like.
One of the things about mechanically or game wise about tabletop that I don't think is like seem as the game part of it, but to me it very much is synergy with the table. I think there's role play is part of the genre. It's right in the name. It's right on the name there, and I think there's a little bit of some people who just like, well, as long as I roll numbers good and hit monsters, I'm doing the game right, which is fine. Like if that's what you're there
Play
for,
that way? Yeah, good.
yeah. No, I love beer and pretzels, guys. I think they're great. I think they legitimately need a way to just hang out with their friends and not worry about that. But when we're on camera, it is very different because we're not just there for ourselves. We're there for or our friends. We're there for the viewer one way or another. And I think like one way I've tried to mechanically gamify that is, how do I make this scene more interesting? And sometimes that is me not saying a damn thing. Sometimes that is just listening and then knowing exactly when to, quip in here or say the one bit of information at the right time. And I know that doesn't give me a numbers for me to like know I'm doing good. That's just a response from the table and the audience. But to me, that's a good way to gamify role playing, is making sure that the narrative flows properly.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think when you were kind of creating and writing, do you think that changed your style when you were kind of in actual play? Do you think kind of doing that kind of deep dive into research and I guess the construction, did it have an impact on how you approached your actual plays?
I think when I first started, I was a lot more hesitant to go with big, louder characters because I didn't know how everyone else was. But I would say once I started meeting other people and then like explaining my writing and my creative process, I learned pretty much everyone else is just as deep into this as I am. They're just as deep into the weeds as I am. Like there are some people out there that like make massive Pinterest boards, or they make soundtracks for their character.
Yes, they
And
do.
that helps and that helps them like get into that mentality of like who this person is. And I think what the big change has been for me is that I've let myself become more aligned with that character. I've become deeper into that character by joining into like, okay, I got Pinterest boards ready. I got playlists ready. I got, hey, who wants to like, write fan fiction? I don't write fan fiction anymore. That was a thing with younger me, but like, it's, I think what has changed is that I've become more of a advocate for making your character part of who you are and less of just make a character for the scenario.
Yeah.
You can do that. You can 100% do that and get away with it and have a great time. But I think the more you get into it, the more you realize you can, all your efforts you were doing to create something, you have to realize that is parts of you you're putting into everything. And you can do the same for your character for an actual play.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things I did want to ask you about is you tweeted the other day that you were just going to be in the process of looking at maybe setting up recruiting people for something you're going to be running. Can you give us a teaser as to what that's going to be about, or is that a super secret project at the moment?
It's not a super secret project. It's just I'm really nervous about it. I've never ran.
Really?
I've never ran on camera.
Ooh,
That's
okay.
that's just a thing. So it's just I'm nervous about it. But
Brilliant. Brilliant.
But I'm like, hey, I was saying like Pinterest. I got Pinterest boards already started. I use Legend Keeper to keep track of things. So I got like all this stuff already ready for the players. But to give you an idea of it, I said earlier, like at the top of this interview, that I love magical girls and I love giant robots and I love tabletop RPGs. And I've mentioned that I'm part of some games that I'm part of some games that run a system called Girl by Moonlight. It uses the Blades in the Dark, like it's based off of that. But it is very much a narrative game that tells magical girl stories. But they use not only Do they use kind of like playbooks, which are familiar if you're familiar with like Powered by the Apocalypse games, something like that. But they also use what they call play sets, which play sets are just okay. You want to build a world with your players. Here's 4 templates. You literally kind of like fill in. There is darkness in the abyss. What is that darkness? And then you all collectively write that down. There is, what are the things that people in this world hold sacred? And then you write that down with the players. And then you build the series with this list. And one of them is to build it based off of you are the last bastion of humanity. You are in space. There are these giant, horrible space creatures called Leviathans, and it's up to you, your friends, and your giant robots, which they call engines, to not necessarily save all of humanity. It's just you left, but to keep yourself alive to the next day. And they actually call for inspiration in that book. Gunbuster, or was it Diebuster? Technically, it's the same series, but just one's a sequel. And Vision of Esclafone. And the Vision of Esclafone is, if you've seen it, is a very interesting anime because it's the popular anime of the days. Actually, probably not as much now. I don't feel like it's as popular now, but it's still popular. Is called Isekai, which refers to effectively the stranger in the strange land trope. Someone comes from one land and comes into another.
Yeah.
But Vision of Esclafone is a Japanese girl who does tarot reading, is brought to a medieval fantasy equivalent. Actually, it's closer to like 16th, maybe 15th century. I've been looking into it, but like it's around that time frame. And it turns out that her tarot reading is real, and she has a very real power, and people want that power. And I thought that was fascinating. And I thought, well, you're pulling inspiration for that. So what I'm coming up with for an actual play, I'm calling it right now The Walled Garden Knights of Twilight, is going to be something very similar where you play as just an everyday person who has maybe a very esoteric hobby of some kind, that you are pulled into this fantasy world, very much like Vision of Esclafone, where it is revealed that you have an innate magical power that you don't have access to in your world. Something blocks it. Some kind of just something about Earth is we know what magic is, but we can't access it. You leave it and you go to this world, you have access to this power, and you have to now you are initiated into a group of magical knights that are tasked with protecting this world. Either against your will, because maybe that's not what you want to do, but hey, they're the ones with the key back home, or maybe this has been your fantasy the whole time. This is what you've been wanting to do. And part of that is because I'm basing it off of this existing game that has a playbook and a system, it means that I have to introduce the Leviathans, the creatures, which have translated into these gigantic. They can be as small as like a four-door sedan, or as large as an aircraft carrier. Bug creatures that just roam the land, eating everything that they find mindlessly. There might be a reason for it. I'm not going to tell you, but there might be a reason for why they're doing all that. And your only hope to stop them is that your magic powers these, what they call, this is from the text, I'm just going to take that, called engines, these giant robots that are made from the remains of the corpses of these bugs that they've killed before. Once they kill them, they can start scrapping them for parts effectively, because their shells are really powerful, and this can get a little graphic, so I apologize, but the muscle that they use is repurposed and kept alive with magic so that you can pilot this bug mech to save this realm from these horrible creatures. And that's one part of it.
That sounds incredible, I gotta say.
That's one part of it.
Amazing.
But the other part of it is that it's also I want to lean into, because I like doing things where it's like, here's a horrible thing that's happened in the world. By the way, did you know that society also sucks? Because there's a bunch of like court intrigue of like, we should probably be bracing ourselves, joining together, fighting against these giant bug monsters. But someone's like, yeah, but like the rival kingdom is getting a little uppity, and I'm worried about that. So we're going to go send you to attack another kingdom. Like, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to attack people. There's giant bug monsters. There's a real existing threat. But they're getting uppity. So go attack some peasants. No, I don't want to attack peasants. What? Why are you doing this? Like, it's very much this. I want to challenge people's ability to balance I'm going to be a hero with realizing that maybe there's no good way to be a hero. Maybe being a hero is a moment and not a job,
That sounds great. It really does. I can't wait to see that. I think it's going to be incredible.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking the time to chat to me today. I've only got one question left, and it's something I kind of like to ask everybody.
Mm-hmm.
How do you deal with social media? Because you said at the start, I mean, I think you're very much like me, is started on Twitter/X, found a home there. That's where most people know me. How do you stay sane on social media?
Take breaks. That's really the only way of doing it. Social media is interesting because it is how we communicate with like-minded individuals. But I am increasingly noticing, especially on Twitter, that our reach isn't finding people as much. So what I'm trying to do is, instead of focus on whatever drama is going on this week, because there's always something, is I'm focusing on my own personal projects. And then once I have something ready, I announce it and I engage with the people who are interested in that. I engage with people who want to be part of what I'm engaged in. Because I think if you just sit on social media looking at whatever's causing the greatest amount of trending on Twitters, you're going to be miserable because people don't talk about positive things. Like they're not as, personal. People like to be enraged. There's a very real psychology in that. I could explain it because that's technically what my degree is in. I understand it. I don't like it, but it's not, it is what it is. So I would say dealing with it is just take breaks, only post about what you're actually interested in, only engage in what you're actually interested in, and all of a sudden things become a lot easier and also become a lot more fun. I also recommend that you probably don't worry about your following, because it just seems like it doesn't really matter so much at my stage. It doesn't really seem to matter that much. I think if I have like 3.5K followers on Twitter. If I had 10, maybe I'd say like, yeah, it probably matters then, because at that point you're getting like weird advertising deals and shit like that.
Yeah.
Like it's very different at that point. But if you're just like starting off, if you have less than, 100 followers, less than 500 followers, less whatever, it's not a big deal if you don't post every day. It's not a big deal if you're not on all the time, because you're not the source of someone else's like entertainment.
Yeah.
But if you then post instead your exciting big project that you're looking for, gauging like who would like to be involved, then you're going to all of a sudden see people who are like, yeah, this is what's happening. I want to be in part of that. I want to engage in part of that.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think you're right. I think it's too easy to get drawn into the drama of, whatever the latest issue is, and it gets exploded and you actually think, no, you're okay. I think I'll take a pass on that. And just talk about the things that interest you. Absolutely.
Yeah. Another big thing about the drama is it turns out a lot of it's very esoteric and you have to have been there. So I'm just going to tell people, don't just jump into drama ever. Like, you probably don't know all the details.
Nope.
And even if you know someone who's part of it, you probably don't know all the details. So I would rather let the people who involved hash it out, and they can, they'll come home with it. They'll be fine with it.
Absolutely. Logan, thank you so much for chatting to me today. I think I've learned so many things today. It's been amazing. I really do wish you all the best with all the projects coming up. When you do go to that kind of crowdsourcing, you'll have to come back on and kind of talk to us about it and how the project's going and everything. But as we kind of end, do you want to just remind people where they can find you and what you've got going on at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me most places on the internet at Logan the GM. That's pretty easy to find. You can find me with Apochromatic Unlimited, obviously, we play a whole bunch of games. We're getting our zine up and running again. And again, we're a TTRPG POC focused collective. That's goal is to raise the voice of POC people in the space. Outside of that, you can catch me. I play a character on a actual play called Bloom and Blight, where I play a guy named Wolfsbane. He is, I affectionately refer to him as Vegeta if he was a twink. So Vegeta from Dragon Ball Z, if he was a little bit more sassy, which he's pretty sassy. And then I am also on a actual play on what's called Entropy Emporium, where I play Chief, which Chief is the old guy who's been like this close to retirement, but then the old leader of the group died, so the guy with the most experience has to come in now, and he has to lead these kids type of situation. That both of those are actually Girl by Moonlight games. If you can't tell, I really like the game. I really like the narrative structure of it, and I can go on and on about it. But both of those are Girl by Moonlight. So if you've been interested in that game, or at least maybe trying something that's a little bit different, that's something not just your Pathfinders, your D&Ds, that would be a great intro to teach you how narrative storytelling can really drive your games forward. Outside of that, I mean, if you follow me on Twitter, you'll find what I'm doing, because I like to retweet my own projects. So,
again, thank you so much today. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and I wish you all the best of luck with everything that's coming up. And that's it for today, folks. Thanks for joining us. All the details of everything that we've been talking about is going to be in the notes for the show as well. And do come back again and join us once more, where I'll be talking to people within the TTRPG industry, and hopefully learning out some more interesting things about how things are done. But for now, take care of yourselves and those that can't, and do join us again. Thanks, everyone. We'll speak to you soon. Bye.